I am counting my teeth again. 14. No. 15. Wait. I already counted that one. Start over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That cannot be right. I had 32 teeth when I entered through the door. I remember because I counted them that morning. Or was it that evening? The sky here does not tell you which is which. The sky here does not tell you anything except that you are being watched. 17 teeth now. I need to start again. This is what clarity feels like in the Shivering Isles. This is a good moment, a lucid moment. I know my name. I know I came from Cyrodiil. I know I was someone before the door, before the butterfly, before the cheese. I know these things the way you know a dream upon waking, the details sliding away even as you grasp at them. My name is, my name was, my name will be. Does it matter? Names are just sounds we make to pretend we are permanent things in an impermanent world. Sheogorath taught me that, or I taught myself that, or the walls taught me that when they started whispering. 18 teeth. I have grown another one while thinking about my name. I was a scholar of the arcane university. That feels true when I say it, though truth is a slippery fish in these lands, always wriggling out of your hands and flopping towards stranger waters. I studied the schools of magic with the dedication of a man who believed understanding was possible. Destruction, restoration, alteration, conjuration, illusion, mysticism. 6 disciplines that promised the world could be known, categorized, mastered. I spent 11 years in those halls. 11 years of careful notes and measured experiments. 11 years of believing that knowledge was a fortress you could build against the chaos of existence. I specialized in illusion magic. The irony of that does not escape me now. I wanted to understand how perception could be altered, how the mind could be tricked into seeing what was not there or missing what was. I thought I was studying the magic from the outside, like a physician studying a disease through glass. I did not realize I was learning the vocabulary of my own unmaking. My quarters in the university were small but orderly. A bed against the north wall, a desk facing the window, 347 books arranged by subject and author. I remember that number exactly because I counted them every morning as part of my routine. Routine was important to me. Wake at the 6th hour, count the books, wash my face with cold water, eat a small breakfast of bread and cheese, begin my studies. The same pattern every day for 11 years because patterns meant safety, patterns meant control. I had colleagues who found me strange. Too rigid, they said. Too afraid of deviation. They were right. Though I did not admit it then. I was terrified of disorder, terrified of the moment when the careful categories of my mind might fail to hold the world in place. I studied illusion magic the way a man afraid of drowning might study the ocean, hoping that understanding the waves would keep them from pulling him under. Then the strange door appeared on the Niban Bay Island. News of the portal spread through the university like fire through dry grass. A doorway to the realm of Sheogorath, a passage to the Shivering Isles. Most of my colleagues spoke of it with the comfortable distance of academics discussing a curiosity, fascinating phenomenon, worthy of study, perhaps send an expedition. The usual measured words we used to make the extraordinary seem manageable, but I could not stop thinking about it. I lay awake at night in my ordered room, staring at the ceiling, and the door burned in my mind like a wound, a doorway to madness itself, a place where the rules I clung to had never existed. The thought should have terrified me. It did terrify me. And yet I found myself drawn to the island 3 weeks after the reports began. I told myself I was conducting research. I told myself I would simply observe the portal from a safe distance and take notes. I brought my journal and my quill and my carefully maintained sense of being a rational man doing rational things. I stood before the great door with its grinning face, and I felt the boundaries of myself begin to blur at the edges like wet ink. The door spoke to me. Not in words exactly, but in a kind of pressure against the inside of my skull. It asked me a question I still cannot articulate. Something about whether I wanted to stay in my fortress of routine forever, or whether I wanted to know what lived in the spaces between the stones. I told myself I stepped through because I was a scholar seeking knowledge, but that was a lie I was telling myself even as my foot crossed the threshold. I stepped through because I was already mad. I just did not know it yet. The passage beyond the door led to a chamber filled with butterflies, thousands of them. wings catching light that came from nowhere, colors shifting between beautiful and somehow wrong. They seemed harmless at first, decorative even, like someone had scattered living jewels through the air. Then they swarmed. They covered my face, my hands, my eyes. Their wings were not soft. Their wings were razor edges and tiny teeth. I screamed into a cloud of them and tasted something sweet and something rotten. When they finally dispersed, I was bleeding from 100 small cuts, and a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once was laughing. "Welcome to the Shivering Isles," the voice said. "We do hope you survive the orientation." A Bosmer named Haskell appeared then, immaculate and utterly bored, and explained in the driest possible tone that I had passed the first test. Most visitors, he informed me, turned back at this point. He seemed almost disappointed that I had not. "They tell you there is a choice when you enter. Mania or dementia, the golden path of ecstatic madness, or the shadowed road of despair. They frame it like a decision, like you have any control over what the Isles will make of you. I chose mania because the colors were brighter, and brightness seemed safer than darkness. That was my first lesson in how poorly my old logic served me here. Mania greeted me with a sky the color of a fever dream, purple and gold and colors I do not have names for, all swirling together like someone had wounded the heavens and they were bleeding light. The grass beneath my feet was too green, an aggressive green, a green that seemed personally offended by my presence. And everywhere, there were people who were happy in ways that made happiness seem like a symptom. The first citizen I met was a Bosmer woman sitting beside the road, carefully arranging stones in a spiral pattern. She had been at it for what she claimed was 400 years. When I asked her why, she laughed until she wept and told me the stones were her children and she was teaching them to dance. Her eyes were the most joyful I had ever seen. Her eyes were the most terrifying I had ever seen. There was no bottom to that joy. It went down forever like a well with no water. I spent 3 days in Bliss, the Golden City. Or perhaps 3 weeks. Time moves strangely in the Isles, stretching and compressing like taffy in the hands of an amused god. The buildings were painted in colors that should have clashed but instead harmonized into something almost painfully beautiful. The citizens danced in the streets to music, only some of them could hear. They invited me to join their revels with such genuine warmth that refusing felt like cruelty. A Dunmer man insisted on becoming my guide. He called himself Laughing Theron, though he told me his mother had named him something else before the Isles had improved him. He showed me the wonders of mania with the enthusiasm of a proud parent, the gardens where the flowers sang, the taverns where the drinks tasted like memories, the artists' quarter where a woman had spent 30 years painting a single portrait of Sheogorath that was never quite finished because the subject kept changing. "Everything is beautiful here," Theron told me as we watched a Khajiit juggle balls of crystallized laughter. "Everything is exactly as it should be. Do you not feel it? The perfection of not having to make sense?" I felt something. I felt the edges of my carefully constructed mind beginning to soften like butter left too long in the sun. I felt the temptation to stop counting, stop categorizing, stop holding the world at arm's length with my routines and my patterns. I felt the exquisite relief of almost surrendering. But then Theron took me to see the green moat, and I understood that mania's joy was not an escape from horror. It was a different flavor of it. Green moat. The luminescent dust that grows in the swamps of mania. The citizens consume it like water, like air, like prayer. It brings visions of impossible beauty and feelings of infinite connection to everything that is and was and might be. It also hollows you out from the inside like termites in wood, leaving only the shape of a person where a person used to be. I watched a young imperial man take his daily dose in a den near the edge of Bliss. His face transformed into something radiant as the substance took hold. He saw angels, he told me. He saw the face of Aetherius itself, and it was smiling at him. He saw his dead mother welcoming him home to a place where nothing had ever hurt, and nothing ever would. He wept with joy. He could not stop weeping with joy. The tears carved channels in his cheeks where they had worn away the flesh over years of constant ecstatic crying. When the visions faded an hour later, I saw what lived beneath the joy. Emptiness. A hunger so vast it had eaten everything else. He would have done anything, betrayed anyone, destroyed himself utterly for another taste of that artificial transcendence. The joy was real. The joy was also a cage with walls made of desperate craving. Mania's gift is showing you a heaven you can never truly reach, then making you spend eternity reaching for it anyway. I fled to dementia because I thought the darkness might be more honest. The border between mania and dementia is not a line on a map. It is a feeling that creeps over you like cold water rising. One moment the sky is that painful purple gold, the next it is grey, and you cannot remember when it changed. The colours drain away so gradually that you do not notice until you look at your own hands and realize they look like things that belong to a corpse. Crucible, the city of dementia, squats in the swamps like a creature waiting to die. The buildings lean against each other as if too exhausted to stand alone. The streets are mud and worse than mud. The citizens do not dance here. They shuffle. They mutter. They stare at you with eyes that have seen things that cannot be unseen and have decided looking at anything else is not worth the effort. I understood dementia immediately in a way I never understood mania. This was my fear given form. This was what I had been running from with all my routines and patterns and carefully counted books. The absolute certainty that nothing mattered. That order was an illusion. That the void was always there, just behind the thin paper of meaning we paste over reality. In mania, I felt my mind stretching towards something it could never grasp. In dementia, I felt my mind collapsing inward like a dying star. An Argonian woman approached me on my first night in Crucible. She moved like someone walking through water, each step an effort against forces only she could feel. She asked me if I knew the secret. When I asked what secret, she laughed. And the laugh was the loneliest sound I have ever heard. The secret, she said, is that there is no secret. We are all just waiting here, waiting for something that will never come, waiting because the waiting is all there is. I have been waiting for 200 years. I do not remember what I was waiting for, but I cannot stop. She walked away into the fog, still laughing that hollow laugh. I never saw her again. I think about her every day. I think about her every day because I understand now that I am her. I have always been her. We are all just waiting for something that will never come. The denizens of dementia do not ignore their suffering. That would require energy they do not possess. They cultivate it instead, tend to it like a garden of thorns. I visited a temple where worshippers knelt before an altar of regret, each one murmuring the names of people they had failed, opportunities they had squandered, words they had never spoken. The priest explained that this was prayer. By embracing their disappointments fully, completely, without reservation, they achieved a kind of twisted serenity. There was nothing left to fear when you had already mourned everything. I watched a man spend 3 days composing his own eulogy. He wrote it on sheets of paper made from his own skin, which he peeled away in thin strips with the patience of a craftsman. When I asked if the pain bothered him, he looked at me with genuine confusion. Pain, he said, is the only thing that proves I still exist. The joy of mania is a lie that tells you everything is wonderful. The sorrow of dementia is a truth that tells you nothing is. Which would you rather live with? I did not have an answer. I still do not. The descent is not sudden. That is what no one tells you about madness. You expect a breaking point, a moment of dramatic rupture where sanity ends and insanity begins. But it is not like that. It is like falling asleep. It is like becoming fluent in a new language so gradually that one day you realize you are dreaming in it. I noticed small things first. My thoughts began to curve in ways they never had before. I would begin a sentence in my head, and it would spiral off in unexpected directions, following paths that seemed perfectly logical in the moment, but could not be reconstructed later. I started seeing patterns in things that I knew, intellectually, contained no patterns. The arrangement of stones, the flight of birds, the way the shadows fell. Everything meant something. Everything was connected to everything else in a vast web of significance that only I could perceive. Then the larger things. I lost hours. Not in the normal way of distraction, but in the complete absence of memory. I would find myself in places I did not remember walking to, doing things I did not remember starting. Once I woke up standing in a swamp, waist-deep in water, screaming a name I did not recognize. Once I came to myself in the middle of carving words into my own arm with a dull knife, words in a language I do not speak. The Isles were rewriting me. That is the closest I can come to describing it. Every citizen of the Shivering Isles was once someone else, someone with a name and a history and a self that made sense. The Isles take that person and they unmake them, slowly, lovingly, piece by piece. They replace the parts that do not fit with new parts that do. By the time the process is complete, you cannot remember who you were before because the person who would remember no longer exists. I watched it happen to others. A Breton merchant who had come through the door seeking trading opportunities slowly forgot why profit mattered, then forgot what profit was, then forgot he had ever been a merchant at all. A Nord warrior who had entered seeking glory gradually lost interest in combat, then lost the ability to hold a sword, then lost the memory that swords existed. They became citizens of the Isles, perfectly adapted to their new home, perfectly happy or perfectly miserable depending on which side claimed them. I felt it happening to me. I fought it at first. I clung to my routines like a drowning man clings to wreckage. I counted things, everything, obsessively. Teeth, stones, stars, heartbeats. Counting was sanity. Counting was proof that the world could still be measured and known. But the numbers started to behave strangely. They would not stay where I put them. 14 became, 17 became 20, 3 became a number that does not exist in normal mathematics. The counting became its own form of madness, a ritual that no longer connected to anything real. It was during one of my counting episodes that the Golden Saints found me. I had been sitting in the same spot for what I later learned was 6 days, counting the ripples in a pool of water that had no source. They lifted me without gentleness and carried me through passages I do not remember, past doors that opened onto impossible geometries. The Lord of the Isles wished to see me, they said. He had been watching. He was curious about the one who counted. They also spoke of something else as they carried me. Something called the Grey March. A coming storm, they called it. The time when order would sweep through and unmake everything, when their lord would become someone else entirely, when the Isles would die and be reborn as they had died and been reborn countless times before. They spoke of it the way farmers speak of winter. Inevitable, survivable if you were lucky. Part of the cycle that made this place what it was. I did not understand then. I am not certain I understand now, but I know that even madness has its seasons, and even chaos follows patterns it cannot escape. Then I met him. The throne room of Sheogorath is not a room in any normal sense. It is a space that contains all possible spaces. It shifts and writhes while pretending to stay still. The furniture rearranges itself when you are not looking, and sometimes when you are. The mad god sits on his throne like a spider in the center of a web made of broken minds. He was shorter than I expected. That was my first coherent thought upon seeing the Prince of Madness, the ruler of the Shivering Isles, the god whose realm had been dismantling me piece by piece for weeks or months or years. He was shorter than I expected, and his eyes were the color of an oncoming storm, and he was eating cheese. "You're the one who's been counting," he said without looking up from his meal. "I like counting. I used to count things. Then I realized that numbers are just sounds we make to pretend infinity has edges. So I stopped. I recommend it. Stopping, I mean. Not the cheese. Never stop the cheese. I tried to speak but found I had forgotten how. The words were there, somewhere in my mind, but the path between thinking them and saying them had been washed away like a road in a flood. I stood before the god of madness, and I made sounds that were not quite words, and he listened with genuine interest, tilting his head like a curious dog. "Oh, you are far along," he said with something that might have been approval or might have been hunger. "I can see it in you. The old you is almost gone, just a few threads left, and snip, snip, snip. Off they go. Do you know what you will be when you finish becoming? Neither do I. That is the beautiful part. That is the only beautiful part. Becoming something no one expected, not even yourself." He offered me a wedge of cheese. I took it because refusing a Daedric prince seemed unwise, and also because I had forgotten that cheese was not typically consumed as a sacrament. It tasted like every emotion I had ever suppressed. It tasted like the scream I had been holding back since I stepped through the door. I ate it, and I wept, and Sheogorath watched me with an expression that held no judgment, because judgment requires believing that things can be other than they are. "Here is a secret," he said, leaning close enough that I could smell his breath, which smelled like desperation and birthday cake. "The secret is that you were always mad. Everyone is. Sanity is just madness with better marketing. You built all those little walls in your mind, all those routines and patterns, because you knew the chaos was always there underneath. Coming here did not make you mad, little scholar. Coming here just helped you stop pretending you were not. He touched my forehead with one finger, and I felt something break, and I felt something begin. The crisis came as a choice, though choice is perhaps too generous a word. The Isles demand transformation, but they allow you to select its direction. Mania or dementia. Joy that devours or despair that consumes. You must belong to one or the other. No one remains neutral. No one remains themselves. I stood at the border again, the place where colours drained away into grey. On one side, Bliss beckoned with its eternal revelries, its green moat dreams, its bottomless happiness that was also bottomless hunger. On the other side, Crucible waited with its patient misery, its existential certainty that nothing mattered, its strange peace of having already surrendered to the void. Both were madness. Both would unmake whatever remained of the scholar who had counted his books each morning in his ordered room. I thought about the Bosma woman arranging her stone children. I thought about the imperial man weeping his face away for a glimpse of manufactured heaven. I thought about the Argonian woman waiting for something that would never come. I thought about all the citizens of the Isles who had once been someone else and were now exactly what this place needed them to be. Was that destruction or transformation? Was there a difference? Sheogorath appeared beside me without warning, as he often does. He said nothing this time. He simply waited, watching me stand at the boundary between two forms of beautiful annihilation. His silence was more terrifying than his words had been. I asked him what would happen if I refused to choose. If I walked back to the door and returned to Cyrodiil, back to my counted books and my cold water and my careful patterns. He smiled, and the smile had too many teeth, some of which I think were mine. You can leave any time you want, he said. The door is always open, but you cannot take back what you have learned here. You cannot unfeel what you have felt. You will return to your tower and your books and your routines, and every single day you will know that they are lies you are telling yourself. Every single day you will know that the chaos is still there underneath. That is the real madness. Not this. This is freedom. This is finally admitting what you always were. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to rage against the God who had broken me. But I could not find the anger, and when I searched for where it used to live, I found only a strange gratitude. He was right. He was right in the way that terrible things are sometimes right. I had been running from myself my entire life, and all my scholarship and all my routines were just elaborate mechanisms for not looking at the void that lived where my certainty should be. I chose neither. I chose both. I stepped onto the border, and I stayed there. I am something new now. Not a citizen of mania with its manic joy, not a resident of dementia with its heavy despair. I am a creature of the boundary, a being who lives in the space where the two truths meet, the joy and the sorrow, the everything and the nothing. I walk the line between them because that is where reality actually lives, in the tension between opposites that can never be reconciled. My teeth still multiply when I am not paying attention. I have 47 now, or possibly 63, depending on which teeth I count as mine. My thoughts still spiral in directions that would have horrified the man who carefully arranged 347 books by subject and author. I still hear whispers in walls and see patterns in stones and sometimes forget that there was ever a world beyond the Shivering Isles. But I am not lost. That is what I need you to understand. The scholars of Cyrodiil, if any of them ever read this, will think I have been destroyed. They will add my name to the list of those consumed by the realm of madness. Another cautionary tale about the dangers of stepping through doors that should remain closed. They will be wrong. I found something in the Isles. Not sanity, certainly, but a kind of truth that sanity cannot accommodate. The truth that control is an illusion we manufacture because we cannot bear the alternative. The truth that the patterns we see in the world are patterns we project onto it. And without our projection, there is only chaos. And the chaos is beautiful. And the chaos is horrifying, and both of those things are true at the same time. Sheogorath visits me sometimes in my little dwelling on the border. He brings cheese, which I no longer find strange. He tells me stories about other people who have come through the door, other scholars and adventurers and desperate souls seeking something they could not name. Some of them break. Some of them are remade. Some of them, like me, find a third path that was always there, waiting for someone to notice it. The Isles are not what you think they are. They are not simply a realm of insanity, a place where minds are shattered for the amusement of a mad god. They are a mirror. They show you what you already are. stripped of all the careful lies you have constructed to make existence bearable. What you see in that mirror determines what you become. The madness is not imposed upon you, it is revealed in you. Sheogorath does not make people mad. He simply creates a space where pretending otherwise is no longer possible. I count my teeth again. 72, 114, 3. The number changes each time, and I have stopped finding this distressing. Numbers are indeed just sounds we make to pretend infinity has edges. The counting was my last routine, my last grip on the person I used to be. I count because it is familiar, not because it means anything. It is a ritual that connects me to the man who once believed the world could be measured and known. I perform it out of something like affection for that frightened scholar and his fortress of patterns. If you are reading this, if someone has found these words and carried them back through the door to the world that still believes in sanity, know that I do not want rescue. Know that I do not consider myself a prisoner or a victim. The Shivering Isles took everything I was and showed me that everything I was had always been a performance, a desperate attempt to keep the void at bay. When the performance stopped, when the masks fell away, what remained was not nothing. What remained was something stranger and more honest than I had ever allowed myself to be. This is what madness is like in the Shivering Isles. It is not an ending. It is a beginning you were always too afraid to choose. It is the moment you stop counting and start seeing. It is the peace of finally admitting that you never understood anything at all, and the liberation of realizing that understanding was never the point. The sky is purple and gold and grey all at once. The walls are whispering secrets in a language I almost speak. My teeth number infinity now, or perhaps 0. Sheogorath is laughing somewhere, or crying, or both. And I am here, on the boundary, exactly where I belong, counting nothing at all.